Runners, happy Wednesday and welcome to our Coaches Chat. And today, as always, I'm excited. We have Cathy Wysin from our partners at HSS. Cathy, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me.
It's gonna be really cool. Runners, if this is your first chat, especially with HSS, this is the chat which I always tell runners, don't ask us any other time, because if you have any injuries that you've been experiencing, or even things you maybe had in the past you want to prevent, things you've heard, injury-related, body-related, bone-related, this is the chat where you can kind of talk about that, because she's a physical therapist at Hospital for Special Surgery. We're going to talk about marathon training. We're going to talk about your feet and how important they are to running, all in today's chat. A lot of you guys are gearing up for the TCS New York City Marathon coming up here in about 19 weeks, I think it is. I lost count. Right about there. So training is kind of picking up. Your miles are getting in. You're enjoying the hot weather, hopefully getting out there nice and early in the mornings. But Cathy, like I said, thank you for joining us. And I kind of want to start with the marathon. It's on a lot of people's minds, whether it's TCS New York City Marathon or any fall marathon, because there are a ton of them, or even half marathons. I know I'm running a half in the fall. Talk about kind of, I call it prehab. There's rehab when you're injured, but prehab when you're not injured. So what runners can do now in the training when they're healthy to kind of stay healthy, and it'll improve their training throughout the process.
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. So I think one of the misconceptions is not mixing in enough strengthening. I think we think of strengthening as just rehab, but it really is part of that prehab. So we really should be mixing in strength training. I strength train at least 1 to 2 times a week, with really focus on the core and hip strengthening, because your core strength and stability allows you to be a more efficient runner. It allows for a stable base, and hip strength gives you also that supportive base and provides that balance and stability, because running is actually a single leg activity. And I don't think runners really always realize that. So you really need that foundational strength. So I think runners love to run. And I think, like I said, I think we think of strengthening as something you do when you're injured, but it's really something that should be incorporated, once or twice during the week. I also think things like foam rolling, for those who may not know, foam rolling is a nice, really myofascial release technique to help relieve muscle soreness and tightness. Again, not something just if you're injured. I think something that should really be part of your training routine that we should be doing pretty consistently. I know I don't do it as much as I should, so I have to practice what I preach, but I think we need to have that shift of making those things part of a routine and not just if we're injured.
Cathy, you mentioned you do strength training once or twice a week. What kind of workouts do you do? I mean, you're healthy, you're not injured, so maybe a lot of runners are in your position. What do you do? How long do you do it? Would you do before, after your workouts? Kind of describe your routine. Maybe someone should follow based off of their obvious strength background.
Yeah, so I do strength training on days when I'm not running, and I try to cross train once a week. So I keep it really basic. I have some bands at home. I have my stability ball. I do a lot of sideline clamshells, sideline leg lifts to really get the glutes. I do a lot of bridging on my physio ball, jackknives, planks, side planks. I keep it really basic and easy things that I can do at home. I maybe spend about 30 minutes doing strength training. I also do a lot of balance work, just because running is a single leg activity. So it's, really important for balance. And I foam roll. My hamstrings, my quads, my IT band. So I try to knock off all those things, but I probably, do my strength training about twice a week, and try to just do those, basic exercises. Increasing reps as reps get easier to really work some of those muscles to fatigue, because all of those muscles are working for however many miles you're out there running on a day-to-day basis.
I've been enjoying my resistance band recently. I've had a little hip injury that just kind of popped up about, 3 weeks ago. And I've noticed it on my long runs more so than the short runs. And it's kind of during the commercials on my Netflix show where I'll, do the clamshells, like you said, with the resistance band or the leg lift. Anything to get those glutes and hips kind of working. I've noticed the more you do them, I always feel like even in foam rolling, the more you do them, the less you have to do them, because then you're healthy. So you don't do them as long or as often. If you do especially foam rolling, I was like, you'll notice if you foam roll tomorrow, you'll notice that wasn't there 2 days ago. I should spend time on that, not in your calf muscle, because you didn't notice it before. So it's kind of notice things before they become a little bit bigger.
Yeah. And I think this is really easy stuff that you can do at home. You don't need to have a gym membership. You don't need fancy equipment. Just laying on your side and doing clamshells or leg lifts, you're getting the resistance of gravity. And if you're doing the exercise right, you're going to feel the burn. So you can have Netflix on in the background, laying down on your floor and, run through some of this stuff pretty easily. So you're going to get a pretty good bang for your buck with some of these basic exercises. You can do it home, even just holding a plank for 20 to 30 seconds. It's basic. You can do it at home.
Something I like about the plank is you can do it from a very beginner level to bring up to a more advanced level. You hold it longer kind of stuff. So something almost anyone can do at home, no matter where you're starting off from.
Yeah.
What type of, as marathon picks up, what type of injuries do you see most in maybe distance athletes, but speak to marathons because that's what's coming up. Any common injuries that you see with runners coming into your office?
Yeah, I think it's really going to be those overuse injuries that we see in runners and marathon athletes, and I think it really ties into just doing too much too soon. There's that general rule of thumb that we all hear, an increase in weekly mileage by 10%, and I think we tendency just to run, do too much. I think there can also be potentially with runners some faulty form in there, but a lot of this is just ramping up that mileage quicker than what your body's ready for. So I think the common things we see are, your IT band syndrome, that knee pain, that front of the knee pain or that patellofemoral pain syndrome. Shin splints are another one's, Achilles tendonitis. It's all those overuse injuries. And, to kind of touch on form, if there's any sort of weakness or faulty form, now you're ramping up those miles pretty quickly and maybe not running in ideal form.
How often do you see runners maybe coming back from injury too fast? Like they're injured, so they take time off and then they go out and think they're better, but they kind of ramp up. That's a little much also overuse, but they're coming back from maybe an injury that made them a little weaker. So they're not building up that base again. And kind of how should a runner come back from injury? I know it's generic, but coming back from injuries and bringing mileage back up.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're out for an injury for say maybe 2 to 3 weeks and you're rehabbing, you're probably not going to be able to jump back into that mileage you were at. So if you were maybe, I don't know, I'm going to throw a number out there, running 25, 30 miles a week, and then you're out for 2 to 3 weeks, you might not be able to jump right back into that. You might have to start at a little bit less mileage. So I think, if you're out injured, when you come back, instead of maybe going out for that 6-mile run you did twice a week, maybe you cut that back to 3 miles, gradually increasing. I always think it's better to be a little bit undertrained and healthy than to be injured. So if you don't get some of those really long miles in, or if you don't hit that weekly mileage, it's better to be healthy and injury free, in my opinion, so that you can actually get to the start line.
Yeah, as coaches at New York Runners, one of our goals, especially with if any runners are doing the coaching lab, my Run Coach training program that we just released, one of our goals is to get runners to the start line healthy. So, you might miss a 20-mile run or an 18-mile, but if you're not at the start line healthy, you're going to have more issues out there than missing 1 or 2 long runs. So definitely that start line is getting their start line, whether it's virtual or in person, it doesn't matter. Getting there healthy is key, I think, for any runner, whether you're an elite athlete or middle of the packer. It should be getting there as healthy as possible. We do have some quick shout outs, and I want to have a question for you, Cathy. Actually came through here. Quick shout outs. Roberto is writing from Colorado. Hello, Roberto. We also have from Portugal watching. Thank you guys for watching. Exciting for you to watch all the way across another country. And then we have a question from Lori, and this is kind of for you. She says, "Hi, Steve and Cathy. I have flat feet. Is there anything to take into consideration when training for a marathon?"
Oh, you beat us to what we were going to talk about later in the show. So your foot type definitely plays a role into what you may need to consider, and this is kind of the always big topic of footwear. Most people either are flat-footed, or they maybe have a high arch, stiffer foot, or they kind of fall somewhere in between. You hear of that neutral foot. So people who are flat-footed, they typically go into a little bit more of that pronation. That's really what that flat foot is. And they have a very hyper mobile or a very mobile foot. So what can happen with that is you can have potentially some faulty mechanics up the chain. You may have some knee pain. There may be some weak glutes. There may be a variety of things. But one of the first things, you can really do is take a look at footwear. Typically, people who are flat-footed and have a very hypermobile foot, they do better with a shoe that gives a little bit more stability, a little bit of a firmer shoe. So I would definitely start there, because, your foot is the first contact with the ground. And from there, everything changes. So, if you're not really in the right type of running shoes, that can have some impact on things further up the chain. So if you've got a good running store nearby where they take a look at how you're running, I know here in New York, we have places like Jackrabbit that will really help you nail down the right type of shoe. But finding a good place where they can get you the right footwear, and I would say something with some good stability in the shoe would be really the first place to start.
Yeah, definitely. I actually worked at Jackrabbit back in my past life. And it's something we saw all the time. You come in, and there's many places in New York City, or just if you're not in New York City, see someone right now, Mammoth from Netherlands. Thank you for watching. So all over the world now, people watching. Google local running store in your town, your city, and they come up. But you want somewhere that specializes in running. Don't go to the box stores, because you want someone, especially your first time running a long distance race. You want someone that's going to study your foot, look at the foot, put you on a treadmill, have you walk or run, depending on what your comfortability level. And they're going to look at a slow motion camera to see what your foot does as you land. She said flat foot, you might come in a little bit. Some people more neutral. And then they're going to bring out 2 to 3 shoes based off how your foot falls. And from there, you kind of narrow down to kind of what you're looking for. So it's definitely, as Cathy said, that running shoe place coming from there is a place to go. A lot of those runners, a lot of people, employees are runners. They're distance runners. You have some track runners in there. So all types of employees, mostly all runners, do work there, and they've been in the industry for a long time. Guys, keep letting us know those questions. I see a few in here, and let us know where you're watching from. Thank you guys for all the questions. It's really cool to see this come through. So I want to just continue on the feet, because I think it's a great topic, and it's very important to running. There's how many bones, I'm sure in the foot that can impact a runner's gait and impact a runner's training. And so as a runner goes through that gait, the foot hits the ground. What happens with the foot when it actually is in the process of pushing down? We'll say heel strike, most distance runners, and then pushing off with that toe. What's going on with the foot?
Yeah, so it's usually a hot topic, because I feel this usually turns into a conversation about how your foot should strike the ground. I think this is the age-old debate of rear foot strike, forefoot strike, midfoot strike, what type of shoes. So I feel like that's probably coming down the pipe. But in general, a couple key things I think people should be aware about when they run. Your foot actually comes in contact with the ground anywhere from about 80 to 100 times per minute on average. There's going to be some variation with this based on your speed and on your stride, but that's a lot of contacts, and that's per minute. So now you think of that over a 20-mile run. That's a lot of contacts with the ground. So every time your foot actually hits the ground, you land with amount of force, but the ground's actually pushing back against us. So we're getting all this force from the ground that our leg has to absorb, and that starts with the feet. And so that force can be anywhere from 2.5 to 5 times your body weight. So when you start to think about that, oh gosh, I'm landing like 80 to 100 times a minute, all that force on my feet and on my legs. This is where kind of the conversation starts to come in about footwear and how you're striking the ground. So footwear plays a really big role in this, in helping absorb the shock, but there also has to be a fair amount of mobility in the foot, in the leg, to help absorb the shock. So to keep it as basic as possible, because this is a pretty complex thing with running, when your foot does hit the ground, you should get a little bit of pronation, or that rolling in of the foot, so that foot gets flat down on the ground. That's going to first and foremost help you absorb some of that shock. So where this gets a little bit tricky is if people have a very stiff foot and they don't pronate, they have that high arched foot, they lose that ability to absorb shock. What you then need is you need some mobility in your ankle as your body comes over the foot. And then you need strength and mobility, not only in your ankle, so in those calf muscles, but you actually need mobility in your big toe for that push off to propel your body forward. So what you get is this motion throughout the foot and the ankle to help you absorb shock and propel you forward. Where this gets a little bit hairy, Steve, is that if there's, weaknesses in certain areas, if there's limited mobility in the foot and the ankle, or if you're compensating, that ground reaction force can actually exacerbate some of those weaknesses, and that can lead to pain in the foot and the ankle, all the way up the chain into the knee, the hip or the back. So your foot is really moving a certain way, getting that pronation and that push off to help you absorb the shock and propel you forward. So that's kind of a very broad, a broad
No, I think
overview
it was
of what happens. Yeah.
I'm sitting here taking notes from your conversation. I think it's
Jot
great because
everything
feet
down
definitely.
really quickly.
I know, right? Because feet do play an impact into our runs. We land on, you said, is a 1 foot sport, basically on 1 foot, and then you're on another one. So it's where your impact comes from. We talked about strength training before, kind of what to do, weak spaces and how to rehab from injuries, before injuries. What about the foot specifically? What can we do at home to strengthen that foot, maybe when we're watching Netflix?
So calf stretching, really important, because we need that mobility in the calf for that, for our body to translate over our foot. We need that strength. So, heel raises, even toe stretches. So standing and getting up onto those toes, onto that big toe, because you need motion in that big toe to help propel you forward. If you don't have that motion in the big toe, and this is actually something that I deal with, I tend to roll out on the outside of my foot. Your body's going to look for a way to compensate if you have limited motion. Other things that are really beneficial, just, some single leg balance in front of the mirror, because to balance, you're using all those muscles in the foot and the ankle to keep you stable, as well as everything up the chain. Sitting with the foot on the ground and doing some towel scrunches. If you've got marbles, sitting and trying to pick up the marbles with your feet, sort of like toe curls. All of those really work the intrinsic small muscles on the foot. Your calf stretching and your balance are really great ways to kind of be some functional training, because, running is a single leg activity. So kind of a wide range of things you can do.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely, guys, if you taking notes, I'm sure a lot of those workouts that you mentioned can be viewed on YouTube in proper form, so we can kind of go home and research how to do those terms, because I know a lot there, but definitely things to look at before you're injured, because those feet play an important part to your running. Guys, a lot of shout outs. We have some questions. If you have any questions, like I said, put it in the chat. We're going to take them. A question from Tiffany, and this is definitely to you. A question we do get often, so I think I would definitely address it. How does someone new to long distance running know if certain muscles are just sore, or if there's pain that needs to be addressed by a doctor? And when should we run through the pain? And when is there something that needs rest?
It's a great question. So I think if you're going for a couple mile run, you can expect to be, a little sore or achy after the run, because you are using those muscles. Running is a high level sport. But if that pain is lingering, say 1 or 2 days after, if you're having pain just with basic things like getting up and out of a chair, if you're having pain with walking, if you're having pain with stairs, if pain isn't getting better with a rest day or two, then that's probably something that needs to be addressed. I'm a big component of rest days in between runs. I don't like to run back-to-back days. Not everybody does that. But I always say, if I have pain that lingers after a rest day or two, then there might be something going on, because, discomfort or soreness from a workout should get better with rest. It should not be there with basic day-to-day activities. So if you're walking and just pain going up and down the stairs, or just getting out of a chair, it might be something else going on. I think the other big thing for me is, if you have pain when you're running and it's altering your running form, that's a big red flag that you shouldn't be running through that pain, that you should be having someone take a look for you, because pain should never alter how you're running.
I think you're right. I've always told runners, no runner has been injured or even like really sore before going through and all of a sudden going on your long distance run and coming back less injured. It's always going to exacerbate it and get worse and worse with every mile. So as a coach, my always advice is, if you're feeling hesitant or questioning, kind of like I said before, it's better to rest than go out and do that run. You'll get more benefit. And stay home, maybe strength train instead of doing that 5 miles. Stay home and do 30 minutes of strength training instead of a 30-minute run. You're going to get more from it. As long as you don't add those missed miles later on to another run, focus on the rehab of that potential injury.
Yeah, and I think go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead. I want you to add on for sure.
I was going to say, I think a lot of these overuse injuries start out this way. They're little minor things just from going out for a run, and then runners try to run through them. And something that's minor that probably would have reacted well to a little bit of rest and ice gets exacerbated and becomes something, something major. So I think if you're sore, and I agree with what you said, if you're hesitant about going for a run, or if you're moving a little bit differently, take the time off and rest, give yourself that time. I always say if things aren't better within 5 to 7 days, that's the time to go in and see your doctor, see your physical therapist, have a skilled set of eyes take a look at you.
Like that a lot, especially for new runners. A few quick shout outs, guys. Thank you so much for watching, whether you're watching from YouTube or Facebook. Thank you guys so much. We have Mercedes says, thank you for having this chat. Very helpful. Shout out from Queens. That's our first person in New York City watching. So thank you.
Hey,
we also have Carla
from
watching
Queens.
from New York. Exactly. Yeah. Are you in Queens right now?
I'm in Forest Hills. So I love
Forest
another
Hills.
Queens runner.
We have Carla from NYC. And finally, we have Tiffany from, it went away from my screen. Tiffany, thank you for watching. And very last question I want to toss to you. We have Diane, should you run through plantar fasciitis? I'm assuming no, but I want you to kind of give more background on maybe what to do with plantar fasciitis, how to recover from it, and then.
I would say probably no, because running isn't going to make it better. Your plantar fascia is a very thick band of tissue on the underside of your foot. It tends to be irritated pretty quickly, and it either can be a lot of factors that go into it, but a lot of times it's in relation if there's tight calves or limited mobility in your foot and ankle. Can also maybe be related to footwear and foot type. But this is one of those things where running isn't going to make it better. So I would say the short answer is don't try to run through it. It's not going to help you recover any faster. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yeah, definitely pause the running, recover, check with your doctor, your physical therapist. You can make an appointment if you're, I don't know where you were from, up with you guys at HSS to come in for assessment, figure out really what's going on. What's the best way for runners to contact HSS, get an appointment with you?
I said, so we, I don't know if we can pull up the website, but we have a couple phone numbers for our HSS sports facility, our sports and rehab over on the east side. So they do running analysis there. We also have our west side facility. So, if you're looking for a number, you can put that in the chat and maybe we can pop the number in there. But give us a ring. Our website, hss.edu. We have a couple of sports facilities where they do a lot of running analysis. So if you have questions or you need that skilled set of eyes, especially if you're starting your training for the marathon, now's the time to reach out.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining us. Runners, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, thank you for joining. Enjoy the warm weather, but stay safe out there if you're on the East or West Coast. It is brutally hot. Drink water, hydrate, run the treadmill, stay inside, do strength training work if it's too hot to run by you. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.